Taran Voss always believed that she was destined for greatness, or at the very least, for something more interesting than her current occupation, dusting off ancient alien junk in a hidden city beneath the Pacific Ocean. Oceanus, they called it. Sounded fancy, like a five-star hotel, but it was more like the basement apartment of human civilization, damp, claustrophobic, and with a constant whiff of something suspiciously fishy. The city council had kept Oceanus under wraps for decades, a sort of secret bunker for humanity's brightest minds and most gullible idiots. Taran couldn't decide which category she fit into. Her latest find, a series of peculiar alien artifacts, sat under the harsh glare of a lab light, looking as innocent as a toddler caught with a crayon in a freshly painted wall. "I swear they're laughing at me," Taran muttered to no one, mostly because no one else was there to hear her. She ran a hand through her hair, trying to smooth down the perpetual chaos atop her head. "Talking to yourself again. Isn't that one of the first signs?" A voice piped up from the doorway. Dr. Marcus Blaine, her only friend in this underwater asylum, and a man who could make sarcasm feel like a warm hug. "If it is, then this city's full of lunatics," Taran shot back, not bothering to look up from her find. "Last I checked, they don't lock us up for talking to ourselves. Only if you start answering back," Marcus quipped, wandering over to peer at the artifacts. "What have you got here? More alien paperweights?" "Something like that," she said, flashing him a grin. "Except these paperweights might rewrite history or at least scribble all over it with a big black marker." Marcus raised an eyebrow, which was impressive considering he only had half of one left after a lab accident involving a temperamental plasma torch. "Rewriting history. That's a bit ambitious even for you." "Well, it's what the evidence suggests." She tapped the largest of the artifacts, a twisted hunk of metal that looked like a piece of modern art made by someone with a grudge against rectangles. "These artifacts, they show patterns." "Erasure patterns," Marcus gave her a sideways glance. "Erase what exactly? My faith in human intelligence funny." "No, something bigger." "Human history," he chuckled, shaking his head. "You sure you didn't skip lunch today? You're sounding a bit like one of those conspiracy nuts." "Maybe, but the tech embedded in these things is unlike anything we've found before. It's got signatures pointing to interference, alien interference." Marcus crossed his arms, leaning against the lab table with the easy grace of someone who'd spent too much time in gravity-free environments. "You're saying aliens have been hitting the universal delete button on us, not just hitting it, Marcus. They're smashing it with a sledgehammer." Taran's smile was grim. "And I bet the council will love hearing that little bedtime story." "Ah, the council. A collection of the worst types of people, those in power and those who wish they weren't." "Exactly. They couldn't organize a piss-up in a brewery, let alone do something about an alien conspiracy. Well, good luck convincing them. They still think the biggest threat to Oceanus is a leaky pipe." Taran nodded, glancing at the clock. "Time to face the music, or more accurately, the death march of logic and reason." She grabbed the datapad, loaded with her findings, and headed for the council chamber, Marcus in tow. The council chamber was a study in bureaucratic dreariness, with walls the color of old oatmeal and a table so long it could double as a runway. Council members sat arrayed around it like a collection of stuffed suits, each more wrinkled and jaded than the last. "Taran Voss, our resident troublemaker," Councilman Greaves announced as she entered, his voice dripping with the enthusiasm of a sloth on sedatives. "What urgent matter do you bring before us today?" She took her spot at the end of the table, trying not to look like a supplicant before a particularly grumpy pantheon of gods. "I've found evidence of ancient alien interference in our history. Artifacts suggest an intentional erasure of key historical events." The room was silent, the kind of uncomfortable silence that usually followed a public fart. "Aliens?" Councilwoman Hargrove finally asked, her tone implying Taran had just suggested replacing the city's air supply with custard. "Yes, aliens." You know, those intergalactic pranksters who seem to have a vested interest in making sure we never win the cosmic trivia night. MMM. And how exactly do these artifacts suggest erasure? Greaves leaned back, hands steepled in front of him like he was about to drop some profound wisdom. Spoiler, he wasn't. Taryn tapped her datapad, bringing up a holographic display. These symbols, these patterns, they match known interference signatures. And they're not local. This is tech we haven't seen before. What's to say it isn't some ancient human civilization? Hargrove persisted, already 2 steps into her skepticism dance. If it is, they managed to skip a few chapters in our evolution textbooks. This tech is centuries, if not millennia, beyond us. Greaves sighed, the kind of sigh that implied he was dealing with a particularly stubborn child. Your evidence is interesting, vast, but far from conclusive, so we just ignore it. Pretend it doesn't exist like my uncle's embarrassing dance moves at family weddings. We're saying we need more than theories and assumptions. You're suggesting a major revision of our history based on what? A few trinkets. I'm suggesting we investigate before those trinkets bite us in the ass. Hargrove exchanged a glance with Greaves that looked like they were communicating telepathically. Taryn imagined their shared thought was something along the lines of, "When can we get back to our coffee and spreadsheets?" "We'll consider your findings," Greaves concluded, a phrase that in council speak translated to, "We'll bury this in red tape until we retire or die, whichever comes first." Outside the chamber, Marcus clapped a hand on her shoulder. That went well. His grin was all teeth, not a hint of sincerity in it. Oh, smashingly. I'm sure it'll be top of their to-do list, right after ignore Taryn some more. They'll come around or they'll get eaten by space lobsters. Either way, it'll be entertaining. As they walked back to the lab, Taryn couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She glanced over her shoulder, but the corridor was as empty as a politician's promises. "You all right?" Marcus asked, catching the look on her face. "Yeah. Just got a feeling, you know. Like we're not alone. Of course we're not alone. We've got each other, and that's terrifying enough." Taryn laughed, but it was thin and stretched like it had been pulled too hard. The weight of what she'd found settled on her shoulders, heavy and unwelcome. And as much as she loved a good mystery, this one felt like it might bite back. As they reached the lab, the lights flickered, plunging them into temporary darkness. When they came back on, one of the artifacts, the main one, the one with all the answers, was gone. "Well, I'll be damned," Marcus said, more curious than surprised. Taryn's heart skipped a beat, then resumed with a thumping insistence. "Seems our alien friends aren't as extinct as we thought. Nope. And they've got a hell of a sense of timing. Or maybe they know something we don't. Let's just hope it's not something like how to make humans go boom." Taryn stared at the empty spot where the artifact had been, the implications twisting in her gut like a bad meal. If the council wouldn't take her seriously, maybe someone else or something else already had. "Looks like we've got a mystery on our hands," Marcus said, sounding almost gleeful. "Yeah, and if we're not careful, we'll end up at the bottom of it." And with that, Taryn knew this was just the beginning. A beginning fraught with danger, uncertainty, and possibly the end of life as they knew it. But at least it wouldn't be boring. Icarus Dre, a man who'd spent more time in history books than most people spent avoiding their families, shuffled into Taryn's lab with a stack of papers threatening to topple from his arms. He had the frazzled look of someone who'd discovered something big, or at least something that made life marginally more confusing. "Taryn," he barked, nearly tripping over a rogue wire on the floor. "You got a minute?" "Yeah, Icarus, but make it quick." "I'm still reeling from the council's warm and fuzzy reception." He dumped the papers on the table, sending a few fluttering to the floor like oversized confetti. "I've been analyzing those artifacts you found. Managed to decode some of the language." Taryn's eyes widened. "And don't tell me it's just a shopping list for galactic groceries. Worse, it's a message. Warnings, really? About a threat. A threat. Please say it's something trivial like interstellar spam mail. I wish. It talks about a cleansing, an eradication protocol." "Well, shit." Taryn leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the holographic display still glowing above. That's not ominous at all. I've cross-referenced what I could with our historical records. It's like these artifacts were meant to warn us, but someone, or something, ensured they got buried. Fantastic. So, we're potentially sitting on a giant, cosmic bomb, and our leaders couldn't care less. They might care if they knew we're on the prologue of a disaster movie. This isn't just rewriting history. It's like they are prepping for a sequel where we don't make the cut. Taryn rubbed her temples. Marcus, any thoughts? Marcus shrugged, assembling a sandwich from the lab's emergency stash. Sounds like we need to give the council another bedtime story, only this time with added "we're all going to die" vibe. Great. I'll grab my best mad scientist outfit, Taryn grumbled. Maybe then they'll at least listen long enough to laugh me out of the room. On the bright side, Marcus mumbled through a mouthful of crumbs, if they are right, and it's nothing, we just made fools of ourselves. But if we're right, well, doomed either way. Well, that's reassuring. Taryn turned to Icarus. You coming with? Absolutely, Icarus nodded, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. If we're going down, might as well make it a team effort. By the time they reached the council chamber, the atmosphere had shifted from bureaucratic ennui to something akin to a funeral for common sense. Ah, Taryn again, Greaves sighed, his face a canvas of wrinkles deeper than the Mariana Trench. What is it this time? Got more evidence, Taryn began, her voice a mix of urgency and frustration. There's a message decoded from the artifacts, and it's not the kind you want to ignore. Sounds dire, Hargrove quipped, flipping through a stack of notes with all the enthusiasm of a snail on sedatives. What does it say? Icarus stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of scholarly concern. It details a protocol for cleansing. There's an implied threat, possibly aimed at us. Cleansing. Greaves scratched his chin, the sound of his stubble like sandpaper in a blender. And you're sure these aren't just ancient metaphors for spring cleaning? Pretty damn sure, Taryn replied, crossing her arms. The language is specific, unlike anything we've cataloged before. Greaves shared a glance with Hargrove, their synchronized skepticism a testament to years of practiced dismissal. And what do you propose we do? He asked, his tone implying there was very little they could do, short of scheduling a committee to discuss it. Investigate, prepare, maybe bunker down while we wait for the apocalypse, Marcus suggested helpfully. We need to consider this seriously, Taryn insisted. If this warning is genuine, our entire existence could be at stake. The council's reaction was immediate, a collective rolling of eyes so synchronized they could have been rehearsing for a synchronized sarcasm event. Even if this is true, Hargrove said, leaning back with the grace of a self-satisfied cat, what makes you think we can stop it? Good point, Marcus interjected. We could just wait around for the cosmic janitors to show up and wipe us off their to-do list. Enough, Doctor. Blaine, Greaves snapped. We will review the evidence. Until then, I suggest you continue your research. Translation. Keep digging, but don't get your hopes up, Taryn muttered under her breath as they left the chamber. The corridor outside was eerily quiet, the kind of prelude that usually led to bad news or worse company. Taryn felt the weight of their discovery pressing down, as tangible as the city's oppressive ceilings. We've got to keep going, Icarus said, determination etched into his features. If these warnings are real, we need to find more. Fine, Taryn sighed. But I'm not liking our odds. It's like betting on a horse race when the horse is in a different time zone. Optimism, Voss, Marcus said, slapping her on the back. There's always a chance we'll be remembered as heroes, or at least as the idiots who tried. Comforting thought, she replied, but her gaze was distant, focused on the unseen specters lurking at the edges of their knowledge. As they entered the lab again, a strange hum filled the air. The kind that suggested something was happening behind the walls, something mechanical and possibly malicious. What's that? Marcus asked, his sandwich forgotten, an event that was, in itself, historic. I don't know, Taryn said, scanning the room. But it's got all the charm of a dentist's drill. They moved around the lab checking equipment, but the hum persisted, growing louder, more insistent, like an alarm that no one had bothered to install yet. Maybe it's a system malfunction, Icarus offered, though he didn't sound convinced. Or maybe it's our invisible friend sending another message, Taryn countered, her fingers tapping nervously against the tabletop. Before they could speculate further, the lights flickered, casting the room into a strobe-lit dance of shadows. The hum crescendoed, becoming a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through their bones. "Okay, that's more than just a glitch," Marcus said, edging toward the control panel. "Citywide systems are showing anomalies," Icarus reported, his eyes skimming across a digital readout. "Power fluctuations, communication disruptions. It's like someone's playing hopscotch with our circuits. Great, just great. First alien conspiracies, now tech tantrums. What's next? Killer robots." Taryn's voice was tight, her patience wearing thin. "Wouldn't surprise me." "It's been that kind of day," Marcus replied, flipping switches and muttering curses that would make a sailor blush. As they worked, the room settled into an uneasy calm, the hum fading but leaving a heavy atmosphere in its wake. A sense that something was coming, whether they were ready or not. "We need to get ahead of this," Taryn said, glancing at her colleagues. "Find out what's causing these disruptions before it escalates." "Always the optimist," Marcus said with a half-smile. "But yeah, let's see what kind of trouble we can dig up." With their mission decided, they set to work, searching for clues amidst the chaos. But in the back of their minds lingered the thought that maybe, just maybe, they'd opened a door that should have stayed closed. And whatever lay beyond was watching, waiting, ready to make its move. While Taryn and Marcus tinkered with the lab systems, Icarus was buried in data, his focus unwavering as he hunted for patterns amidst the chaos. "There's a subtle rhythm here," he murmured, not looking up from his screen. "Rhythm?" Taryn asked, glancing over. "Please tell me you're not planning to add DJ to your resume." "Not quite. But these disruptions, they are deliberate. Coordinated even, so not just random tech gremlins having a party, not unless they've mastered strategic sabotage," Icarus said, pushing his glasses up with a weary finger. "Someone's testing us, or trying to send a message. Fantastic." "Our invisible friends are getting more chatty," Taryn muttered, anxiety flickering in her eyes. "More like aggressive," Marcus corrected, finally managing to coax the control panel into cooperation. "And I'm not sure we've got the resources to handle it. We've got to warn the council," Icarus insisted, though he sounded like a man resigned to the futility of it all. "Sure," Taryn said, sarcasm coating her words. "Because they've been so receptive to our warnings so far. Then we make them listen," Marcus said, his usual flippancy replaced by a rare seriousness. "Whether they want to hear it or not, we can't just sit around." "Fine," Taryn agreed, though her voice was laced with doubt. "But if they don't buy it, we need a backup plan. Something to keep us from turning into cosmic collateral." With that grim thought hanging between them, they packed up their findings and headed back to the council chamber, hoping that this time they'd get more than a collective eye roll in response. The chamber was as dreary as ever, the same occupants sitting in their usual spots, their expressions ranging from bored to mildly irritated. "Back so soon?" Hargrove asked, not bothering to hide her disdain. "What is it now?" Taryn stepped forward, her resolve firm despite the uphill battle she was fighting. "We've confirmed these disruptions are deliberate. Someone or something is targeting our systems." "Someone or something," Greaves echoed, his tone dripping with skepticism. "And I suppose you have evidence to back this." "Data," Icarus said, holding up his tablet. "Patterns that can't be coincidental." Greaves exchanged a glance with Hargrove, their silent communication as infuriating as ever. "We'll review it," he said finally, his voice dismissive. "But unless you have definitive proof, there's little we can do." "Definitive proof?" Marcus snorted. "Would a giant spaceship hovering over the city do it? Or do you need them to send down a welcome basket too?" The council members were unmoved, their calm indifference a stark contrast to the storm brewing outside the chamber. If it's all the same to you, Taran said, her patience fraying, we'll keep digging. Because if we're right and these warnings are real, we might not have much time. Greaves nodded, a gesture that could have been agreement or simply an excuse to end the conversation. Do what you must, Voss, but tread carefully. We can't afford to panic without cause. Panic. Marcus muttered as they left, I'm all for it. Never a bad time for a good panic. As they returned to the lab, the sense of urgency clung to them like a second skin, the weight of their discovery heavy on their shoulders. Guess it's back to the drawing board, Taran said, her voice resigned but determined. Back to the grind, Marcus agreed, his usual levity replaced by a steely resolve. Icarus nodded, his eyes distant but focused. We'll find the truth. One way or another, and with that promise they dove back into their work, the threat of an unseen enemy looming large over their heads. Because if they didn't find the answers, they knew the consequences could be catastrophic. And this time, there might not be a second chance. Taran squinted at the flickering holographic display. Icarus, you got anything on your end? Her voice had the enthusiasm of a funeral director with a hangover. Just more questions, Icarus mumbled, rubbing his temples as if trying to massage his brain into cooperation. Every time I think I'm getting somewhere, more dots appear that refuse to connect. Like playing connect the dots when the dots are moving, Taran agreed, eyeing the alien artifact before her. It glowed with an eerie blue light, the kind that suggested it held secrets capable of ruining everyone's day. Marcus, leaning against a counter like he was auditioning for a role in Apathy, chimed in. Let me guess, these dots spell out we're screwed in alien hieroglyphics. You're not far off, Icarus replied. I'm starting to think these artifacts are part of some kind of covert observation operation. Alien spies. Great. Just what we needed, Taran said, rolling her eyes. And here I thought the biggest threat to humanity was reality TV. Hey, reality TV has its moments, Marcus protested with mock seriousness. It's not all bad. Sometimes the contestants actually eat something worse than our cafeteria food. Icarus shot him a look. Focus, Marcus. This might be serious. Serious. Marcus raised an eyebrow, well, half an eyebrow, given the lab accident. We haven't been this serious since Oceanus ran out of coffee last month. As the banter drifted, Taran toyed with the artifact, her fingers tracing the strange symbols etched on its surface. The hum from earlier was gone, replaced by a silence so profound it was almost offensive. Without warning, the holographic display blinked out, leaving the room in a sudden and jarring darkness. Well, that's ominous, Taran muttered, fumbling for a flashlight. Icarus cursed under his breath. The city's communication grid just went down. We're cut off. His voice carried a weight that even Marcus couldn't joke away. Perfect. Stranded in a secret underwater city with no way to call for help. Guess we're starring in our own sci-fi horror film now, Marcus quipped, though his usual humor was tinged with an edge of unease. Taran clicked the flashlight on, casting a beam that swept over the lab's cluttered tables. We need to get a handle on this before things get worse. Define worse, Marcus said, picking up his forgotten sandwich, now a sad, soggy thing. Worse as in total system failure, Icarus said grimly. And given our current trajectory, that's not far off. As they moved through the dimly lit corridors, the oppressive weight of the ocean above seemed to press down harder with each step. The city had always been a marvel of engineering, but now it felt like a tomb. Anyone else feel like we're trapped in an underwater tin can? Marcus asked, his voice bouncing off the metal walls. Optimism, Marcus, Taran reminded him, though her own spirits were sinking faster than a lead balloon. They reached the central hub, a sprawling complex of technology and blinking lights, except now most of those lights were dead. Icarus set to work immediately, his fingers flying over the console in a desperate attempt to bring some semblance of order to chaos. Any luck? Taran asked, hovering over his shoulder. Luck left the building a while ago, Icarus replied. But I might have something. Yeah. What? Marcus leaned in, curiosity piqued. Patterns in the power fluctuations, Icarus said, his voice tinged with the kind of excitement a mathematician might feel solving a particularly tricky equation. It's like someone is trying to communicate with us, or taunt us. Taunting I can handle, Marcus said. It's when they start shooting that I have a problem. Taran frowned. Think these are the same invisible friends sending us the warnings? Could be, Icarus replied. Or maybe it's just a test. A test? Taran's voice was incredulous. Let's hope we don't fail it. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, chimed in. If we do, at least we won't live to regret it. The grim humor drew a chuckle from Taran, though the reality of their situation loomed large. We need a way to get word to the surface. Let them know what's going on. Easier said than done with our comms down, Icarus said, frustration seeping into his tone. Then we improvise, Marcus suggested. We're scientists, not quitters. Speak for yourself, Taran shot back. Sometimes quitting sounds pretty good. Yeah, but then you'd miss out on all the fun, Marcus replied with a smirk. Together they worked on a plan, piecing together a solution from the fragments of equipment they had at their disposal. It was slow going, every step fraught with setbacks and the ever-present threat of failure. As the hours wore on, the atmosphere in the lab grew tense, the weight of their isolation settling on their shoulders like a leaden cloak. Even Marcus, usually a beacon of sarcastic cheer, was uncharacteristically quiet. I think I've got it, Icarus said finally, his voice breaking the silence. A way to patch through to the surface. Really? Taran asked, hope flickering to life. It won't be pretty, he admitted, but it might just work. Pretty's overrated, Marcus said. I'll take functional any day. With Icarus guiding them, they cobbled together a makeshift transmitter, a Frankenstein's monster of wires and circuit boards that looked as likely to explode as to send a message. But beggars, as they say, can't be choosers. Okay, Icarus said, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Here goes nothing. The device came to life with a sputter and a hiss, lights flickering as it fought to maintain a connection. For a moment it seemed as if it might work, but then with a disheartening pop it died, a thin wisp of smoke curling from its depths. Well, that was anticlimactic, Marcus said, crossing his arms. Back to square one. Maybe not, Taran said, staring at the smoldering remains. Even if it didn't work, it could still have sent out a signal, a distress signal. Let's hope someone heard it, Icarus said, his voice heavy with doubt. Because otherwise we're on our own. The reality of their predicament settled over them like a shroud. With the city cut off from the world above and the threat of an unseen enemy growing ever closer, they had little choice but to brace for whatever came next. Guess we're in for the long haul, Marcus said, his attempt at levity sounding forced even to his own ears. Yeah, Taran agreed, her resolve firm despite the odds. But if we're going down fighting. Fighting, huh? Icarus echoed, a hint of a smile breaking through his usual stoicism. Could be worse. Yeah, Marcus agreed. Could be raining. And with that they hunkered down, ready to face whatever trials awaited them. Because in a world where survival was never guaranteed, sometimes all you could do was laugh in the face of impending doom and hope for the best. As they settled into a tense silence, the oppressive quiet was suddenly broken by a loud clang from the corridor outside. Taran's heart skipped a beat. Did you hear that? Yeah, Marcus replied, already moving towards the door. Let's hope it's not the welcoming committee. Taran and Icarus followed, stepping cautiously into the dimly lit hallway. The sound came again, closer now, echoing off the metal walls like some malevolent drumbeat. Could be a system failure, Icarus suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Or something worse, Taran said, gripping her flashlight like a weapon. They advanced slowly, the shadows around them twisting and stretching like phantoms. The sound grew louder, more insistent, until they reached a junction where the corridor split in two. Left or right? Marcus asked, glancing between the two options. Flip a coin, Taran suggested, trying to lighten the mood. How about we split up? Icarus proposed, though even he seemed reluctant to follow his own suggestion. Bad idea, Marcus said. I've seen enough horror films to know how that ends. Good point, Taran said. Let's stick together. They chose the left path, the air thickening with each step as if the city itself was holding its breath. The sound led them to a door marked Maintenance, and Marcus wasted no time in pushing it open. Inside, they found a scene of chaos. Panels ripped from the walls, wires hanging like entrails, and in the center of it all, a small, spherical device pulsing with a sickly green light. "Is that what I think it is?" Taran asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Looks like some kind of sabotage," Icarus said, kneeling to examine the device. "Someone's been busy." "Great, just what we needed," Marcus said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "The place is falling apart and we're stuck playing detectives." "I think it's a jammer," Icarus said, standing up. "That's why our communications are down." "Can we disable it?" Taran asked, her mind racing. "Not sure," Icarus admitted. "It's alien tech. One wrong move and it could blow this whole section." "Then let's take it slow," Marcus suggested. "Careful and steady wins the race, right?" The three of them set to work, the tension in the air almost palpable as they carefully unwound wires and adjusted settings, each movement precise and deliberate. Minutes stretched into hours, and just when it seemed like they might never succeed, the device emitted a low hum before falling silent, its light fading to nothing. "Did we do it?" Taran asked, hardly daring to hope. "Looks like it," Icarus said, his voice tinged with relief. "Now let's see if we can get the comms back up." They returned to the central hub, their footsteps echoing through the empty corridors. The silence was different now, less oppressive, as if the city was waking from a long slumber. Icarus worked quickly, his fingers dancing over the console as he rerouted connections and reset systems. And then, with a crackle and a hiss, the comms came back online, the hum of electricity a reassuring presence. "We're back," Icarus announced, a small smile of satisfaction on his face. "And not a moment too soon," Marcus added, glancing at the displays. "Looks like we might have company." Taran followed his gaze to the screen, where a cluster of unidentified signals was rapidly approaching Oceanus. "Looks like our invisible friends aren't so invisible anymore." "Time to sound the alarm," Icarus said, his expression grim. As the warning klaxons blared to life, the reality of their situation hit home with all the subtlety of a freight train. They were no longer isolated, but far from safe. The stakes had never been higher, and with an unknown enemy closing in, it was time to prepare for the fight of their lives. The oppressive silence of Oceanus could make a mime feel chatty. Taran Voss, who considered herself a future legend in the making, leaned against the cold, damp wall of the lab. She stared at the holographic display that twitched like it had a nervous tick. The alien artifacts, spread out on the table like an unappetizing buffet, pulsed with their eerie blue glow. "Look at these things," Taran muttered, half to herself, half to Marcus Blaine, who was trying to coax half his eyebrow back with a portable mirror. "If I didn't know better, I'd say they were mocking us." "Maybe it's a cultural thing," Marcus quipped, setting down the mirror. He was still coming to terms with the fact that his face now sported a lopsided archway thanks to a lab mishap involving an experimental toaster. Humor in the face of dying civilizations. Very on brand for us. "Speaking of dying civilizations," Icarus Dre chimed in, his eyes reflecting a history only he seemed to care about. "I've found a way to trace the origin of those messages. We're going to use the city's ancient tech. Make a cosmic phone call if you will. Think the aliens will put us on hold," Marcus said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "Only if they've got better things to do," Taran replied, rolling her eyes. "Like conquering other more interesting species." Icarus pointed to the holographic display which sputtered into a semblance of clarity. "See these patterns? They're like breadcrumbs leading us right back to our mysterious pen pals." "Great," Taran said, not hiding her skepticism. "Let's hope they're not the kind of pen pals who send packages that tick." The tension in the room was palpable, a heavy reminder of their isolation beneath the waves. The city of Oceanus, usually a beacon for mankind's brightest, now felt like a damp tomb. "Speaking of ticking," Marcus said, glancing at his watch. "We should probably worry about the city's infrastructure crumbling like an intern's first presentation." "Right," Taran agreed, standing up with a sigh. "We've got bigger problems than alien pen pals, like keeping this place from turning into the Titanic without the romantic subplots." "Yeah, but at least we've got the water," Marcus deadpanned. Their footsteps echoed through the corridors as they made their way towards the command center. The city council had been adamant. The secrets of Oceanus were to be protected at all costs, and yet here they were trying to keep it from collapsing under its own weight. As they walked, Icarus filled them in. "The sabotage is getting worse. Systems are failing left and right. It's like someone wants us blind, deaf, and dumb." "Nice to know we're on someone's to-do list," Marcus remarked. "Yeah, right under laundry and pick up milk," Taran added, smirking despite herself. They reached the command center, a room filled with more dead screens than a graveyard of old TV. Icarus went straight to work, fingers flying over the console. The others joined him, each tackling a corner of the chaos. "Think we can boost the signal using the ancient tech?" Taran asked, her voice hopeful. "It's risky," Icarus admitted. "The tech is older than Marcus's jokes." "Hey," Marcus protested, "my jokes are timeless." "Like your fashion sense," Taran shot back, a grin tugging at her lips. As they worked, the air in the room seemed to thicken with anticipation. It was a race against time, against an enemy they couldn't see, and the stakes had never been higher. They had to succeed. Failure wasn't an option. Actually, it was an option, just not a very good one. With a slight hum, the ancient tech began to respond, its lights flickering to life. Taran's heart skipped a beat. "Is it working?" "Looks like it," Icarus said, his voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "Now we just have to see if we can find our way home." Just then, a deep rumble reverberated through the floor, sending Taran grabbing for support. Oceanus seemed to sigh, shaking off its old bones. "What the hell was that?" Marcus asked, looking around as if the walls might answer him. "Structural failure," Icarus said grimly. "We need to stabilize the systems fast or we'll be swimming our way out." "Oh good," Marcus said dryly. "I was just thinking I needed more cardio." Their humor was a thin veil over the dread that sat heavy in their chests. They had one chance to make this work. Otherwise, Oceanus would become their watery grave. "Let's reroute the power," Taran suggested, her mind racing. "We can use the backup generators to stabilize the critical systems." "Risky, but it might just work," Icarus replied, already moving to implement the plan. "Hope you like living on the edge." "Better than dying in it," Marcus quipped, fingers crossed metaphorically and literally. With renewed determination they worked in sync, each movement deliberate and precise. The hum of the machinery rose and fell like a heartbeat, a reminder of the city's fragile life. "Almost there," Icarus muttered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill air. A sudden crackle filled the air, the sound of circuits powering up. The screens flickered, displaying a map of Oceanus with countless red dots, each one a point of failure. "Well, that's not ominous," Marcus said, staring at the screen. "We're playing whack-a-mole with a sledgehammer." "Focus, Marcus," Taran said, though she couldn't fault him for his gallows humor. They all had their coping mechanisms. One by one, the dots began to disappear, replaced by green indicators. Hope surged in Taran's chest, tempered by the reality of their situation. "We're stabilizing," Icarus announced, a smile breaking through his usual stoicism. "About time we got some good news," Taran said, a note of triumph in her voice. "Don't jinx it," Marcus warned, though he too wore a grin. As they continued their work, the alien tech on the table seemed to pulse with renewed energy, as if resonating with their success. Taran glanced at it, suspicion creeping in. "You think these things are helping us? Or they've got a twisted sense of humor," Marcus replied. "Either way, I'm not inviting them to poker night." Just then, an alarm blared, cutting through their moment of victory like a knife. The red lights on the screen flared to life again, a new threat emerging. "What now?" Taran groaned, exasperation clear in her voice. "Looks like the sabotage isn't over," Icarus said, his expression darkening. "They're hitting us again." "Persistent bastards," Marcus muttered. I've had clingier X's. The room seemed to close in around them, the weight of failure looming over their heads. They couldn't afford to let it fall. We need to track the origin of those messages, Taryn said, determination hardening her features. Find out who's pulling the strings. And cut them while we're at it, Marcus added, cracking his knuckles. Fine, but we do this smart, Icarus cautioned. No heroics. We've got enough corpses on payroll already. With a plan forming, they set to work, each movement fueled by adrenaline and desperation. The alien tech glowed brighter, as if sensing their purpose. Let's hope this works, Taryn said, fingers flying over the console. Icarus nodded, his gaze focused. We've got one shot. Let's not waste it. As the machinery hummed to life, the map on the screen shifted, tracing a line through the ether, through the very fabric of space. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. We're getting something, Icarus said, his voice tinged with excitement. Please be good news, Marcus muttered, almost to himself. The room held its breath as the line on the screen solidified, revealing a set of coordinates. A location somewhere out there in the vastness of space. There, Taryn said, a triumphant smile breaking through her exhaustion. We've got them. But before they could celebrate, another rumble shook the floor, sending loose equipment tumbling. The city groaned, its infrastructure protesting. Hold on, Icarus shouted, bracing himself against the console. Okay, now I'm really not inviting them to poker night, Marcus said, grimacing. They held on, the shaking subsiding but leaving behind a stark reminder of their precarious position. Oceanus was still in danger, and their time was running out. We need to move fast, Taryn said, urgency driving her words. We've got their location, now let's figure out what to do about it. You're the boss, Marcus said, though his tone was far from deferential. And when we get out of this, Icarus added, drinks are on you. The promise of survival hung in the air like a tantalizing scent, urging them forward. It was a race against time, against an enemy they couldn't see, and the stakes had never been higher. With every step, every calculation, they pushed forward, determined to save Oceanus and themselves. Because in the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about proving they could face whatever the universe threw at them and come out laughing. And maybe, just maybe, they'd live long enough to tell the tale over drinks. Hopefully in a bar above sea level. The city of Oceanus shuddered like a drunk at last call. The council had always insisted it was an engineering marvel, but tonight it felt more like a leaky colander struggling to hold back the sea's inevitable embrace. Well, isn't this cozy? Marcus said, surveying the chaos unfolding before them. The command center was a cacophony of alarms, red lights, and the constant hum of machinery on its last legs. I always wanted to spend my Friday night contemplating the sweet release of drowning. Cheer up, Marcus, Taryn replied, tapping away at her console. We're not dead yet, though if we were, at least we wouldn't have to pay rent anymore. Death, the ultimate rent control, Marcus quipped, squinting at a flickering screen that looked like it was about to explode just for the hell of it. Icarus, ever the optimist, or perhaps just the least pessimistic, stared at the new set of coordinates they had managed to scrape from the ether. He was trying to connect the dots, but it felt more like assembling a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing and the other half chewed by an over-enthusiastic dog. These coordinates, he said, they point to a sector of space no one's mapped in decades. No surprise there, it's probably swarming with things that want to eat us, or worse, Taryn added, things that want to talk to us. Aliens and their small talk, Marcus sighed. What do you suppose they chat about, whether on Rigel 7, abducting cows? I'm more interested in why they want to erase us, Icarus said, his fingers a blur over the controls. There's a whole universe out there. Why pick a fight with us specifically? Maybe they just really hate our music, Marcus suggested. I mean, I like a power ballad now and then, but I get it. The console chimed, drawing their attention back to the imminent threat. The screens displayed a surge of alien energy signatures moving towards Oceanus. It was like watching a swarm of locusts in space, a pestilence with purpose. Looks like they're not sending a welcome basket, Taryn said. a hint of sarcasm lacing her voice. Guess we can cross friendly neighbors off the list. The air was thick with tension and the smell of burnt wiring. In the corner, the alien artifact pulsed with that ominous blue glow, perhaps laughing silently at their predicament. Or maybe it was just ticking down to a punchline they wouldn't find funny. "We're running out of time," Icarus warned, his face etched with concern. "If they breach the outer hull, Oceanus is done for. And we'll have front row seats to the worst underwater show in history," Marcus added, casting a wary glance at the bulkheads. "Hope we remembered to bring popcorn." "Popcorn, life vests, same thing at this point," Taran muttered. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations and desperate plans. They needed a miracle, and those were in short supply. Just then the main doors hissed open, and in walked something that made even their seasoned nerves falter. The alien envoy, tall, draped in robes that seemed to shimmer with their own unnatural light, and looking very much like a nightmare-given form. "Great," Marcus said under his breath. "They sent a spokesperson." "I hate dealing with customer service." The creature glided forward, its movements smooth and almost hypnotic. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed a deep shade of green. This was a being with intent, and by the looks of it, that intent wasn't to hand out cookies. "Humans," it said, its voice a multilayered echo that resonated in their skulls. "You have meddled with forces beyond your understanding." "Yeah, we get that a lot," Taran replied, crossing her arms. "But we're pretty good at meddling, comes with the territory. We are here to complete the eradication protocol," the envoy continued, unfazed by Taran's bravado. "Your history, your culture, your existence, all must be erased for the balance to be restored." "Balance, huh?" Marcus chimed in. "You sure you're not just mad about the noise complaints?" The envoy's expression remained unreadable, its alien gaze fixed on them. "You cannot comprehend the full scope of what you have disrupted." "Try us," Icarus said, stepping forward. "We're great at not comprehending things." The envoy paused, as if considering whether it was worth the effort to explain to such inferior beings. "Your civilization is an anomaly, a glitch in the fabric of the cosmos. Our task is to remove such anomalies." "Anomaly?" Taran countered, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "I prefer to think of us as the universe's lovable rogues." "You will not be thought of at all once we are done," the envoy replied coldly. Silence clung to the air, oppressive in its finality. The trio exchanged glances, their bravado masking the grim reality that they were severely outmatched. "Well, this has been enlightening," Marcus said, trying to keep the mood light. "But we've got a city to save. Apologies if we don't stick around for the end-of-the-world party." The alien merely watched them, its presence a chilling reminder of their impending doom. Taran, Marcus, and Icarus knew they had to act, and fast. Oceanus was on borrowed time. "Let's see if we can put a spanner in their cosmic works," Taran said, determination flaring in her eyes. "We didn't come this far to let some intergalactic exterminators wipe us off the map." They turned their focus back to the consoles, ignoring the envoy as best they could. The alien appeared content to watch, probably confident in the inevitability of their failure. Or maybe it was just amused by their futile efforts. "Think we can reroute the main power through the alien tech?" Icarus suggested, his hands moving swiftly as he considered the possibilities. "It might just give us enough juice to hold them back." "And if it doesn't?" Marcus asked, though he was already working alongside Icarus. "Then we die trying," Taran replied, her voice resolute. "But at least we go down swinging." With the envoy looming like a specter, they redoubled their efforts. The consoles flickered and hummed, the ancient technology responding to their desperate attempts at a solution. "Systems are overloading," Icarus said, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. "We're pushing this thing to its limits." "Just a little more," Taran urged, her fingers dancing over the controls. "We've got to buy ourselves some time." In the silence that followed, every second felt like an eternity. The alien envoy watched them, its stillness a sharp contrast to their frantic activity. Then, with a sudden crackle, the lights in the room surged, and the alien artifact erupted with a blinding burst of energy. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like everything would implode, taking them with it. But instead, the energy coalesced, forming a barrier around Oceanus, a shimmering dome that pulsed with the same eerie blue light as the artifact. The envoy tilted its head, as if reevaluating their capabilities. Impressive, it admitted, though its tone suggested anything but admiration. But temporary. Temporary's better than nothing, Marcus shot back, a satisfied grin spreading across his face. We'll take what we can get. The envoy regarded them for a moment longer, then turned to leave, its mission far from over. You delay the inevitable, but know this: the cleansing will come, and there is no place for your kind in the universe we envision. With that, it vanished, leaving behind an atmosphere tinged with unease. Taran, Marcus, and Icarus exchanged relieved glances, their victory feeling as fragile as the barrier they had erected. Well, that was fun, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair with a mock casualness. Same time next week, Taran chuckled, though the sound was devoid of real humor. I think I've had my fill of existential threats for the week. They settled into an uneasy silence, the glow of the alien artifact casting long shadows across their weary faces. The barrier would hold for now, but the threat loomed ever-present, a ticking time bomb they couldn't defuse. We've got to find a way to turn this temporary fix into something more permanent, Icarus said, breaking the silence. Otherwise, we're just buying time until they decide to try again. Agreed, Taran replied, determination etched into every line of her face. We need to figure out what makes these artifacts tick and use it to our advantage. Let's just hope they are not on a short fuse, Marcus added, a touch of levity in his voice despite the gravity of their situation. They returned to their work, each aware of the stakes, each committed to finding a way to outsmart their cosmic adversaries. Because in the end, the only thing more stubborn than the universe was a human with a point to prove. And if the aliens wanted a fight, well, they'd come to the right species. The room was a symphony of chaos, the consoles flickering like strobe lights at a nightclub no one wanted to be in. Taran leaned over her console, her eyes narrowed as she picked apart the alien technology like a surgeon with a vendetta. Why do aliens never label anything? She muttered, fingers tapping a staccato rhythm on the keys. Marcus snorted, arms crossed over his chest, his lopsided eyebrow giving him a perpetually skeptical expression. They probably think we're too stupid to read them anyway. Or maybe they just enjoy watching us flail around like this. Icarus, hunched over the adjacent terminal, let out a low chuckle, his optimism starting to wane under the oppressive atmosphere. Flailing is our specialty, isn't it? Maybe we'll invent a dance move out of it by the time we're done. Taran clicked her tongue, concentrating on a particularly recalcitrant bit of alien script. From what I can tell, these artifacts have a secondary function. Something beyond just lighting up like a bad rave. Secondary function, Marcus asked, tilting his head. Like what? Making toast close. Deterring invasive cosmic pests, Taran replied, a grin tugging at her lips. I think we can repurpose it to counteract their erasure protocol. Icarus straightened, his interest piqued. What's the plan, then? Besides throwing Marcus at them and hoping they choke. I resent that, Marcus said, not sounding particularly offended. But I'd do it if it meant a chance at surviving this mess. We need to boost the artifact's signal, turn their tech against them, Taran explained, her voice brimming with the kind of hope that was usually reserved for lottery winners and gamblers on a hot streak. If we can amplify it through Oceanus's systems, it might just interfere with their cleansing wave, or blow us all to kingdom come, Marcus added, ever the voice of cautious optimism. But at this point, what do we have to lose? Your charming personality, Icarus suggested, earning a dry smirk from Marcus. Let's get to it then, Taran said, determination hardening her features. This city isn't going to save itself. They set to work, the air thick with the electric tension of impending disaster. Taran and Icarus scrambled to reroute power from the auxiliary grid, their hands a blur as they worked to integrate the alien technology with Oceanus's failing systems. Marcus hovered nearby, offering sarcastic commentary and occasional moments of genuine insight. The alien artifact sat in the center of the room, its eerie blue light casting unsettling shadows that writhed like living creatures. It was a disconcerting reminder of the stakes they faced, a ticking bomb they hoped to defuse with nothing but spit, duct tape, and a reckless disregard for safety protocols. "Remember, kids," Marcus said, watching as Icarus connected a series of wires with a resigned sigh. "Safety third. Words to live by," Taran replied, her tone dry as desert bones. "Assuming we live." As they worked, the oppressive silence of Oceanus weighed on them like a physical presence. It was the kind of silence that made you want to speak just to fill the void, even if all you had to offer was pointless banter and gallows humor. "Do you think they have a union?" Icarus asked out of nowhere, squinting at the holographic display like it owed him money. "Who? The aliens?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, I mean they're clearly organized, right? Maybe we can negotiate with them. Get them to take a coffee break or something." Taran snorted, shaking her head. "Somehow I don't think they're the kind to worry about coffee breaks, or coffee," Marcus added. "Which is probably why they're so cranky. Let's worry about their caffeine habits once we're not on the menu," Taran said, focusing on her task. Time seemed to stretch and contract in the command center, each minute dragging on interminably while the pressure mounted. But finally, Taran stepped back, eyeing the modifications with a mixture of hope and dread. "All right, let's see if our makeshift miracle holds," she said, fingers crossed metaphorically and literally. "Marcus, throw the switch." "With pleasure," Marcus said, flipping the lever with a theatrical flourish. "Let's see if we bought ourselves a ticket out of this hellhole or a one-way trip to oblivion." The room fell silent as the system hummed to life, the consoles vibrating with barely contained energy. The artifact responded in kind, its glow intensifying, casting the room in an oceanic glow that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. "Here goes nothing," Icarus said, watching the data stream across his screen. There was a tense moment where it seemed that nothing was happening, where the oppressive silence stretched to the breaking point. Then, with a sound like 1,000 champagne corks popping, the system surged, sending a pulse through Oceanus that reverberated in the bones. The alien barrier flickered and then stabilized, the shimmering dome around the city brightening as the artifact's power integrated with the city's systems. It was a precarious balance, a house of cards stacked against the cosmic winds, but it held. "Ha! It's working," Taran exclaimed, relief coloring her voice. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his skepticism giving way to a cautious optimism. "I'd say we deserve a drink, but I'm not sure we'll survive long enough to enjoy it. One crisis at a time," Taran said, eyes still glued to the readouts. "This will give us some breathing room, but we need to figure out how to make it last." Icarus nodded, already delving back into the data. "If we can stabilize the energy flow, reinforce the barrier." "Great," Marcus interrupted, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Let's just hope the aliens take their sweet time plotting their next move." As if on cue, the holographic display flared to life, showing the alien envoy once more. It was a still image, a snapshot of alien arrogance, its eyes as dead as the void. "Bit early for a victory lap, isn't it?" Marcus muttered, glaring at the display. "Let's not get cocky," Taran warned. "This is just the beginning." The room was silent once more, each of them lost in their thoughts and the weight of what lay ahead. The temporary reprieve was just that, temporary. But it was a start, a glimmer of hope in a universe that seemed hell-bent on wiping them out. "Well, team," Marcus said, clapping his hands together. "What's next on the list?" "Saving the universe, lunch break." "What? Let's skip to the saving the universe part," Taran replied, trying and failing to suppress a smile. "But I wouldn't mind a granola bar." Icarus chuckled, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he continued to work. Typical human optimism. Save the world, then think about lunch. "Hey, we're nothing if not persistent," Taran pointed out. "And if the universe thinks it can just erase us without a fight, It's got another thing coming. Here's to being a cosmic nuisance, Marcus toasted, raising an imaginary glass. Beneath their bravado and gallows humor, the gravity of their situation remained. The alien threat loomed large, a shadow that stretched across the stars, and their victory, such as it was, felt precarious at best. But they were human, and if the aliens had expected easy prey, they were in for a rude awakening. Humanity was stubborn as hell, and as far as Taran was concerned, they'd just begun to fight back. With their initial plan in motion, the trio huddled around the consoles, poring over data and schematics, searching for the key to turning their temporary solution into a lasting one. It was a race against time, against cosmic forces that dwarfed their understanding, but they refused to back down. "Think we'll make it?" Icarus asked, glancing up from his work. Taran met his gaze, her expression unyielding. "Dunno. But I do know one thing, if we go down, we're taking them with us." Marcus nodded, his lopsided eyebrow giving him an air of devil-may-care determination. "Hell yeah. If they want a fight, we'll give them one they won't forget." The room buzzed with renewed energy, the pulse of the alien artifact a steady reminder of the stakes. They had a plan, they had a purpose, and they had each other. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to turn the tide against the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. The console buzzed with the kind of energy that made you wonder if you'd accidentally hotwired a nuclear toaster. Taran, with all the grace of a seasoned gambler throwing dice, began punching in commands like her life depended on it. Which, inconveniently, it really did. "I can't decide if this is exciting or if I've just got a death wish," Icarus mused, his fingers flying over his keyboard with the fervor of a caffeinated octopus. Marcus, eyebrow askew like a misplaced accent, snorted. "You've got to have a death wish to work in this line of hobby. Are you calling this a hobby?" Taran shot back, eyes not leaving the screen as errors popped up faster than conspiracy theories on the dark net. "If this is a hobby, remind me to take up knitting. Less chance of annihilation." "Well, you know, there's always the chance of stabbing yourself with a needle," Marcus replied, deadpan as ever, though his fingers twitched against the console, ready to leap into action. The alien artifact pulsed ominously in the center of the room, its eerie glow intensifying as they fed more power into it. Like a cosmic jellyfish that had just heard a particularly dirty joke and was lighting up accordingly. Taran swore under her breath as another alarm blared on her console. "We're losing power from Sector 9. Icarus, reroute it from the auxiliary grid. Quick before this thing decides it prefers us." "Well done." "On it," Icarus replied, already diving into the system. His optimism, like a helium balloon slowly deflating, had settled into a resigned sort of determination. "I didn't think I'd be spending my Friday night saving the world." Again, the room's oppressive silence had transformed into a cacophony of chaotic noises, each console competing for the title of most annoying sound in the universe. Marcus slapped the side of a stubborn screen as if it were a misbehaving jukebox. "I don't know about you, but I'm starting to miss the days when the worst thing I had to worry about was my lab catching fire." "That was last week," Taran pointed out, her tone laced with dry humor. "Exactly," Marcus replied with a sharp grin, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Simpler times." Finally, with a flurry of keystrokes and a not-so-gentle kick to a reluctant power conduit, the system stabilized. The artifact's glow became a steady thrum, casting an azure light that was, if not comforting, at least less likely to explode in their faces. "Okay, we've got a shot," Taran declared, brushing non-existent dust from her hands like an artist admiring her work. "Let's hope our alien friends appreciate the effort we've gone to entertain them. Yeah, maybe they'll send us an intergalactic fruit basket," Icarus quipped, adjusting his headset as new data poured in. Marcus whistled low as he stared at the display, his skepticism battling with a reluctant flicker of hope. "And here I thought I'd never live to see humanity metaphorically flip the bird at an alien armada." The alien message reappeared on the holographic display, this time accompanied by a network of alien script that writhed like an angry serpent. It was almost as if they were watching a particularly convoluted breakup text unfold in real time. "Here they come," Taryn said, her voice a mixture of trepidation and excitement. "Let's hope they're not the forgiving type." The artifact surged, its energy radiating outward in a brilliant cascade that rippled through Oceanus's systems. The city's barriers flared, reinforcing themselves with a luminous web of alien and human technology. It was a patchwork quilt of survival, stitched together with desperation and sheer bloody-mindedness. The alien presence, previously looming like an impending weather front, hesitated. It was the kind of pause that might suggest a moment of intergalactic forehead scratching. "Looks like we've got their attention," Icarus commented, his voice tight with anticipation. "Great," Marcus said, his sarcasm sharper than a vibroblade. "Let's just hope they don't decide to call in the big guns." Taryn's brow furrowed as she scrutinized the data. "If we can keep this up long enough, they might decide it's not worth the hassle. That, or they'll just drop a planet on us," Marcus responded with a casual shrug. "You know aliens and their fondness for overkill." Always with the optimism, Taryn shot back, her fingers dancing over the controls as she fine-tuned the power distribution. "Remind me why we keep you around again." Marcus grinned, a flash of teeth. "For my winning personality." The alien barrier, once a looming threat, began to falter. It was as if the artifact's power was rewriting the rules of the game, shifting the balance in their favor. The oppressive alien energy signatures that had hovered at the edge of detection now receded, like a tide pulling back to reveal the battered shores of hope. "Think they are leaving?" Icarus asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and cautious optimism. "Looks that way," Taryn replied, her own shock bleeding into her words. "Seems like whatever they expected, it wasn't us biting back." Marcus leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with a self-satisfied smirk. "Guess even aliens can get indigestion." A collective breath filled the room as the reality of what they'd accomplished began to sink in. They'd cheated the Cosmic Reaper, at least for now, and that was no small feat. "So, what now?" Icarus inquired, glancing between his companions. "Do we break out the champagne and call it a day? First, we make sure this isn't just a temporary fix," Taryn reminded them. "Then we figure out how to keep it that way. And maybe grab a drink somewhere in there," Marcus suggested, his lopsided eyebrow quirked in amusement. "Because if there's one thing this job has taught me, it's that alcohol is the answer to most of life's existential threats." "Wise words," Icarus agreed, his laughter tinged with relief. "I'll drink to that." As the alien threat receded, the trio slumped back in their chairs, exhaustion finally catching up with them. The room, once a battlefield of sounds and lights, now settled into a tranquil hum, the eerie glow of the artifact a reminder of what they'd faced and what undoubtedly lay ahead. "Well, team," Taryn said, her voice carrying the weight of their shared ordeal and the promise of what they'd achieved. "We did it. We actually did it." Marcus grinned, his sarcastic facade giving way to genuine pride. "And we didn't even blow ourselves up. I'd call that a win." "Yeah," Icarus said, nodding in agreement. "Let's just hope it stays that way." They sat in a comfortable silence, each contemplating the path that lay ahead, the victories and challenges yet to come. The universe was a vast and unfathomable place, full of threats and mysteries they'd barely begun to comprehend. But for now, they'd won a reprieve, a moment to catch their breath and savor their small, hard-fought victory. And maybe, just maybe, they'd given the universe something to think about. After all, humanity had a way of surprising everyone, especially themselves. With a determined smile, Taryn stood, stretching out her cramped muscles. "All right, boys. Let's get this place cleaned up before the next crisis hits." Marcus snorted, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "You mean before Icarus here spills his coffee again?" "Hey, that was one time," Icarus protested, though his grin was sheepish. "And technically it was Marcus's fault for telling that joke." Whatever helps you sleep at night, Marcus replied with a chuckle. Taran shook her head, a fond smile playing on her lips. Come on, let's get to work. Who knows, maybe we'll actually get a quiet night for once. Doubt it, Marcus remarked, his tone wry. But that's the fun of it, isn't it? Together, they set about restoring order to the chaos of the command center, their movements fluid and familiar. The threat had passed for now, but their work was far from over. There were systems to repair, data to analyze, and a city to protect from whatever the universe decided to throw at them next. But as they worked, their banter and laughter filled the room, a testament to their resilience and camaraderie. And as the stars shimmered outside the great dome of Oceanus, they knew one thing for certain. Come what may, they'd face it together, with a smile, a joke, and a defiant refusal to give in. After all, they were human, and that was something worth fighting for. The aftermath of the alien incident left Oceanus like a party cleanup after a rager that got entirely out of hand. Lots of chaos, a few questionable stains, and someone's dignity left behind in the bathroom. The system's alarms had finally shut up, a silence so profound it was almost loud, if that could make sense. But peace and quiet had a way of unsettling people who were too used to impending doom. Taran leaned against the command console, watching the others through bleary eyes. She rubbed at her temples, the weight of the recent events pressing down like a hangover she didn't remember earning. Well, that was fun, Marcus said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Let's do it again next weekend. If by fun you mean terrifying and soul-crushing, then sure. Let's make it a date, Taran replied, mouth quirking up in a tired smirk. I'll bring the snacks, Icarus chimed in, though his eyes were fixed on the holographic display which now showed a series of graphs that only a mathematician could love. And by snacks, I mean sedatives. The joke was weak, but they laughed anyway, a cathartic sort of release that tasted like relief with a side of exhaustion. Even the alien artifact, still glowing faintly at the center of the room, seemed to pulse in time with their laughter. It was a bit like having a radioactive disco ball that couldn't resist a good punchline. The command center, with its hodgepodge of human and alien tech, had become a sort of war room, and now it looked more like a crime scene waiting for the detectives to discover all the gory details. Debris littered the floor, cables snaked across consoles, and the screens flickered with the kind of manic energy that suggested they were in need of serious therapy. Has anyone considered that maybe these aliens were just trying to give us an intergalactic wake-up call? Taran mused, her gaze settling on the artifact. Like, maybe they were just tired of us cluttering up the cosmos with our bad reality shows. Marcus snorted, shaking his head. If they were fans of space hoarders, then I don't blame them. Have you seen what we keep in storage? Pretty sure I saw a box labeled random wires and stuff just yesterday, Icarus added, a wry grin tugging at his lips. Bet that's the first thing aliens come to collect when they visit. Ah yes, the legendary random wires. Our civilization is saved. Reminds me of your lab, Marcus, Taran teased, her voice light despite the gravity of their situation mere hours before. Hey, those wires have sentimental value, Marcus shot back, a grin splitting his face. Besides, one man's trash is another alien's treasure. With the immediate danger past, the trio found themselves in that strange limbo between a victory and the next inevitable crisis. They moved around the command center, picking up the pieces of their latest adventure, securing the tech, and trying to forget that they'd almost been cosmic toast. So, what do you think they're gonna do with this data? Icarus asked, gesturing to the console. Do you think they'll finally believe us about the alien threat, or are they just gonna sweep it under the rug like last time? We've got all the evidence we need, Taran said, a determined edge in her voice. But they've got a talent for turning a blind eye. We just need to make sure this time it sticks. Like gum to the bottom of your shoe, Marcus added helpfully, his single remaining eyebrow arching with amusement. As they worked, Taran couldn't help but reflect on the resilience of humanity, the way they bounced back from disaster with a mixture of stubbornness and dark humor. It was the cosmic equivalent of falling down the stairs, breaking a leg, and then laughing it off over a stiff drink. Humanity was weird like that, and maybe, just maybe, that's what kept them going when the universe seemed hell-bent on wiping them out. The city of Oceanus, with its sprawling engineering marvels and echoing silences, began the slow process of rebuilding. The barriers had held, the technology had worked, mostly, and now it was a matter of putting the pieces back together into something that resembled normalcy. "Do you ever wonder," Taran mused aloud, "about what we'll leave behind? Like, when we're all gone, what's going to be left to tell our story?" Marcus glanced up from the console, his expression uncharacteristically thoughtful. "Probably a pile of junk and some terribly outdated memes, but who knows? Maybe a few of us will make it into the history books, or at least the footnotes," Icarus added. "The bit that says, inexplicably, humanity survived." Taran chuckled, but there was a serious undercurrent to their banter. The artifacts were a testament to the civilizations that came before, a warning and a record, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were supposed to do more than just survive. With the alien threat neutralized for now, they had an opportunity to focus on what really mattered, preserving their history and ensuring that when the next crisis came, they would be ready. "Think we'll ever get used to this kind of thing?" Icarus asked, leaning back in his chair with a sigh. "Probably not," Taran admitted. "But the universe doesn't wait for us to catch up, does it? We've got to keep moving, keep fighting, even if it's just to spite them. And who knows, one day maybe we'll even return the favor," Marcus suggested, his grin sharp and dangerous. They worked through the night, taking turns to rest when they could, their camaraderie a lifeline in the vast emptiness of space. They were a motley crew, but they were all they had, and that was enough. The city outside their command center flickered back to life, systems powering up and lights returning to their usual glow. Oceanus had taken a hit, but it was still standing, still defiant, ready to face whatever came next. Sounds of repair and restoration filtered through the walls, a hum of human activity that spoke of resilience and determination. Taran stood by the console, watching as the data continued to stream in. "You know, for once I'd like to be remembered for something other than not dying." "Hey, not dying is a pretty good skill to have," Marcus pointed out, clapping her on the shoulder. "You're like the universe's worst cockroach." "Thanks, I think," Taran replied, shaking her head with a laugh. "Come on," Icarus interjected, standing and stretching. "Let's get something to eat. I'm pretty sure I've got a protein bar in my bag that's only slightly expired." "You know how to live, Icarus," Marcus mocked, following him out. Truly the height of luxury. They left the command center, stepping into the corridors of Oceanus. The city was battered, but it had definitely seen worse. As they walked, the familiar sights and sounds of their home greeted them, like a welcome mat that had been through the spin cycle a few too many times. "Feels weird, doesn't it?" Taran remarked, glancing around. "Like we're living in a post-apocalyptic sitcom." "Yeah, laugh track and all," Marcus agreed, his voice carrying that blend of fondness and exasperation only a lifelong resident could muster. They reached the mess hall, which had somehow remained intact during the chaos. Taran grabbed a tray, surveying the offerings with an expression that suggested she was pondering the mysteries of the universe, or whether she was brave enough to try the mystery meat. "Do you ever wonder what's actually in this stuff?" Icarus asked, poking at his protein bar like it might bite back. "Best not to think about it," Taran advised, selecting the least suspicious option. "Just pretend it's gourmet." Marcus, ever the optimist, lifted his own tray with a flourish. "To surviving another day and the hope that tomorrow's menu won't kill us." They laughed, clinking their mismatched cups together in a toast. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and that made it enough. As they sat, eating and talking, Taran found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. The alien threat, the artifacts, the city of Oceanus, all of it felt like part of something bigger, a story that was still unfolding, page by page, chapter by chapter. And maybe, she thought, that was the point. To keep going, to keep fighting, to keep writing their story, even when the universe seemed determined to end it. "Do you think they'll come back?" Icarus asked, his voice serious for the first time that day. Taran considered her answer, eyes flicking to the window where stars blinked in the vastness of space. "Probably, but next time we'll be ready. And if we're not," Marcus challenged, his gaze steady. "Then we'll wing it like always," Taran replied, her smile both confident and a little reckless. "We're good at that." They finished their meal, lingering over the remnants of their drinks, savoring the moment of calm. They'd face whatever came next together with all the resilience and defiance that humanity could muster. After all, they were human. Stubborn, irreverent, unpredictable, and that, they decided, was something worth fighting for. As they rose to leave, Taran took one last look at the city around them, her heart swelling with something akin to pride. They'd been through hell and back, but they'd survived, and now they had a chance to build something better. Together, they walked out into the corridors of Oceanus, ready to face whatever the universe had in store. And as the door closed behind them, Taran couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, they'd given the universe something to think about.